Hi, everyone. In this debate, we'll be discussing how technology poses a threat to the future of special education and applied behavior analysis. My name is Cara Lane, and I'm the introducer, and this is my team. We have Emma Dugan, who's the illustrator / fielder, Kelly Wagner, who's the summarizer and pro researcher, and Mindy Avery, who's the summarizer / con researcher. We are all graduate students here at Ball State University studying applied behavior analysis. This is the debate for the course 619-800 with Dr. Bissett. Today we will be debating whether or not technology poses a threat to special education and applied behavior analysis. Although applied behavior analysis is evidence-based treatment for autism and other developmental disabilities, access to services by those living in rural areas is scarce. Web-based service delivery, also known as telehealth, has increasingly been explored in other fields, now being used in the field of applied behavior analysis to provide trainings to parents and other providers. Similarly, evidences have shown that technology has helped even the playing fields for students in special education. It has also allowed students with disabilities greater access and opportunities to present in both education and special education and at all levels of education. Although there are many advantages with technology and the ABA field, there are also many disadvantages. There have also been some complications with obtaining the devices as well as maintaining them for each specific individual. In our debate, we will be covering these main topics: the quality of life, issues of telehealth and speech-generating devices, and the role of technology, including aspects that involve communication, social validity, and skill acquisition and risks. We will also be discussing the normalcy of its cons of speech-generating devices, such as necessity for communication and battery life. The political, economical, and societal factors within speech-generating devices and telehealth will also be touched upon such as availability and acquiring these complications. Following, we will discuss the funding issues related to speech-generating devices and telehealth, such as licensure and costly devices. Lastly, we will be debating the ethical considerations and the dilemmas that fall in speech-generating devices and telehealth categories, such as privacy and violations. We hope you enjoy our debate, and I will now turn it over to Kelly Wagner, our first summarizer and pro researcher, who will be discussing quality of life for speech-generating devices.
Hi guys, as you all know, up to 50% of individuals with autism are nonverbal or have difficulty generating speech. Speech-generating devices can assist individuals with communicating, and this is particularly important for things like communicating preferences, wants, and needs, because communicating these things can significantly improve the quality of life an individual has. We can teach individuals to communicate using SGDs instead of them engaging in some other form of maladaptive behavior to get what they want. There are numerous tablets out there, some of the most popular being Apple products such as iPads and iPods. And particularly the use of iPads or iPods with the specific app called ProLogo2Go has been shown to be effective in teaching verbal behavior in individuals with autism following, and I must emphasize, following a behavior analytic prompt and prompt fading procedures. This research comes from the Laura et al. Study from 2018, which also found that individuals preferred speech-generating devices to the use of manual sign language and PECs. The use of speech-generating devices also aligns with the following core principles of behavior analysis: do no harm, respect autonomy, benefiting others, and according dignity. Mindy will now summarize against the use of speech-generating devices improving the quality of life.
Hi everybody, I'm going to be discussing the argument against using technology as it may hinder the quality of life in regards to speech-generated devices. According to Rio's 2018, there are no measures of social validity. To reiterate this point, if measurements social relevance and usefulness has not been detected, the impact of the intervention will be unknown. Secondly, using a speech-generated device for the acquisition of verbal behavior is ineffective. Verbal behavior programming includes teaching, communication, and language. Lastly, if a device is broken or lost, an individual may lose skills which he or she previously mastered. This could increase behavior issues as well.
Next, we will be discussing the quality of life for telehealth. Kelly will be debating the quality of life for telehealth, and Mindy will be discussing the cons of telehealth.
So I think we all know telehealth has been increasingly important these past few months, as that is probably how most of us have been likely conducting sessions with our clients and students. Telehealth can be important during periods of epidemics, pandemics, and in the event a client has other health risks that prevent them from being exposed to others. Additionally, telehealth gives one the ability to train and learn in the natural environment. Two main points I will elaborate on, and Emma will showcase visuals pertaining to these points, are that skill acquisition via telehealth has been shown to be effective for certain instructional methods and preference assessments, as well as being effective for implementing functional assessments and functional communication training. With regard to my first point, and we can bring up the graph now, skill instruction via telehealth, in addition to behavioral skills training, has been shown to be effective in training individuals not specializing in behavior analysis how to manipulate the environment for a trial, training on instructional strategies, providing consequences for correct and incorrect responses, as well as conducting multiple stimulus without representation preference assessments. This is according to Sump et al. 2018. And training acceptability was high for both types of training, and maintenance effects were high as well for 5 of the 6 participants. Emma will now present the visual demonstrating the effectiveness from this article.
So in this visual, you can see that the mean averages that clients performed at both in person and in telehealth demonstrates that telehealth provided, if not equal, then better therapy to individuals that they would be receiving in vivo versus telehealth. It shows that telehealth can be just as effective at providing treatment when needed.
Okay, the second point I want to stress is that even complex skills such as functional assessments and functional communication training can be taught and implemented using telehealth. Even if problem behaviors are showing up at home, parents can be coached through functional assessments and teach functional communication training. In a study done by Wacker et al. 2013, 17 individuals diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, PDD, NOS, or Asperger's syndrome were included as participants. Caregivers were coached on how to implement the functional assessment via telehealth using a behavior therapist. The results of the functional assessment were that most of the individual's behavior functioned as either escape or tangible. And after the FA, functional communication training was introduced as a replacement behavior. Caregivers were instructed how to teach functional communication training. Sessions occurred weekly and lasted 1 hour with the caregiver and a therapist. Overall, there was a 93.5% reduction in problem behavior, and the parents rated the entire intervention as very acceptable. And will now show how effective teaching functional communication training using telehealth was for these individuals.
So in this graph from the Wacker et al. Article, you can see for all 6 participants, they started with a baseline. Then once they introduced the functional communication training, a few of the clients had spikes of, I forgot the word, you guys, oh no.
Destructive.
And oh no, what is it called?
They showed signs of an extinction burst.
Extinction burst. I couldn't think of the word extinction. The sign of extinction burst. However, the behavior quickly dropped after this, and they leveled out to a pretty lower amount of behavior, most of them resting at 0 occurrences once functional communication training had been done. On average, it took 21 sessions to complete this training, but the sessions could range from 6 to 42 sessions depending on the participant's needs. And the results from this showed that the telehealth results were comparable to those that were received in vivo with functional communication training.
I will now be reviewing the against argument for quality of life in regards to telehealth. Firstly, Mustafoglu, 2018, explains that online learning without appropriate supervision could increase victimization and depression, especially in vulnerable populations. Secondly, creativity could be hindered while receiving services through telehealth, as individuals may fail to think outside the box. A third factor to consider is generalization of skills. It will be difficult to generalize skills learned on a computer screen into other settings. Lastly, there are other health risks to consider when an individual is learning through a computer. Some of these risks include obesity, which has tripled in the last 20 years, vision impairments, and issues related to posture. Each of these risks could have long-term effects that can range in severity.
Next, we will be discussing the normalcy for speech-generating devices. Kelly is pro speech-generating devices in that they promote normalcy for clients, and Mindy will be discussing the cons of normalcy for speech-generating devices.
The arguments for using speech-generating devices creating a sense of normalcy in one's life are apparent. As previously stated, autism spectrum disorder is associated with deficits in communications, and SGDs can ameliorate this issue by teaching individuals how to communicate health information, preferences, and needs. The devices most commonly used are iPods and iPads, or some kind of tablet, which are portable and lightweight, making them readily available when an individual needs to communicate. These devices give individuals a sense of normalcy because they are able to communicate what they need or want in a given situation. It's their voice, and they can carry it with them wherever they go. Again, I'd like to stress that the use of SGDs goes along with some of the core ethical principles of applied behavior analysis, particularly according dignity and respecting autonomy. Mindy will now discuss issues related to normalcy regarding speech-generating devices.
I will now discuss problems related to normalcy when investigating the effectiveness of speech-generated devices. As briefly mentioned previously, if a device is not functioning due to it being broken or running out of battery, the individual will be unable to communicate and their normalcy will be altered. An inability to command could result in behavior issues. A speech-generated device must be easily accessible at all times. There must be a level of responsibility. Specific settings may create difficulty in easily accessing a device. For instance, carrying the device in gym class during a mile run. Lastly, from Rios 2018, an individual may get distracted easily if a SGD has other applications or interesting icons.
Next, we will be discussing the political, economical, and societal factors for speech-generating devices. Kelly is pro-political, economical, and societal factors for speech-generating devices, and Mindy will be discussing the cons of political, economical, and societal factors for speech-generating devices.
One of the main points regarding political, economical, and societal factors for the use of technology with regard to the use of speech-generating devices is that they've become less expensive and more readily available through the introduction of iPods, iPads, tablets, and apps. Previously, speech-generating devices such as Dynavox could cost thousands of dollars, and now you can get a device for a couple $100 plus the cost of an app. Furthermore, Medicaid and Medicare, in addition to private insurance companies, are offering funding for individuals based on user need. School districts have even begun to pay for them. Mindy will now discuss arguments against the use of SGDs with regard to political, economical, and societal factors.
According to Lore 2018, there are several key points as to which political, economical, and societal factors may have an effect on using SGDs for communication. First, there is no clear evidence-based system for their use. Secondly, There are a number of steps that one must go through in order to obtain a device. Some of these steps may include parental consent, choosing the best fit for the individual you are working with, deciding who and how the device will be purchased, figuring out when the device will arrive, and who is competent in setting it up. It is important to note that even if initial steps are taken to receive a device, this does not ensure that a device will be approved.
Next, we will be discussing the political, economical, and societal factors for telehealth. Kelly is pro-political, economical, and societal factors for telehealth, and Mindy will be discussing the cons of political, economical, and societal factors for telehealth.
It's widely known that there's a lack of BCBAs for the population of individuals with autism spectrum disorder and developmental disabilities. Telehealth closes that gap. It's increased the availability of BCBAs and RBTs to areas that may not have access to treatment centers or BCBAs or RBTs. Most families already own a tablet or a PC, making it easy for them to procure telehealth services in their home. Additionally, the use of telehealth aligns with the following core ethical principles of behavior analysis: do no harm and benefiting others. I will now turn it over to Mindy, who is considering the other side of this issue.
Next, I will include cons of political, economical, societal factors in relation to telehealth, according to Rios 2018. The cost for hardware and software needs to be taken into consideration. Families and/or school districts that do not have funding to access these requirements for online teaching may not have the option to teach online and/or maintain online teaching. Secondly, video conferencing poses ethical and legal challenges, along with data and storage concerns. Lastly, there must be a consent given from parents and/or caregivers to record. A direct quote from Rios 2018, the BACB and the APA currently do not have regulations specific to the use of teleconsultation in the provision of services.
Next, we will be debating the pros and cons of funding for both speech-generating devices and telehealth. Kelly is arguing that the relatively little funding systems in place for telehealth and speech-generating devices. Mindy will be discussing the cons of funding for both speech-generating devices and telehealth.
Currently, there are no formal requirements for teacher certification or BCBA prep in using speech-generating devices or telehealth. The same ethical principles apply to the use of telehealth as they do for in-person services. BCBAs should consult with a speech-language pathologist on how to set up a speech-generating device when using one with a client. Although there are no licensure requirements aside from being a BCBA to provide behavior analytics services via telehealth, one should check with the state regarding licensure requirements, as in some states you're required to be both a BCBA and a licensed behavior analyst. This is only applicable if you are working across state lines. Mindy?
Funding issues that may arise in both SGDs and telehealth include systems may be too cumbersome and also too expensive, and may be complicated to operate. Parents may not be willing to understand the use, and it could be costly to provide technical services, both preliminary and if there is an issue. Also, it may be too expensive for clients and/or schools and/or communities that are underprivileged who may not have the same resources.
Next, we will be discussing the ethical considerations in regards to technology posing a threat to special education and applied behavior analysis. Kelly will be discussing suggestions for ethical considerations when using technology, and Mindy will be discussing the arguments related to potential ethical violations. Mindy will go first.
Peterson 2019 provides information related to multiple ethical violations to consider when utilizing technology in special education. This includes client confidentiality and protected health information, unauthorized individuals accessing meetings, electronic storage and data transfer being insecure, issues related to consent, and needing to train non-BCBAs to provide services. There are several ethical codes that could easily be violated if careful consideration is not accounted for. Emma is going to present visuals pertaining to this.
So the first ethical code that we need to follow is by the APA. They have multiple codes that need to be followed when dealing with telehealth, including boundaries of competence, maintaining confidentiality, recording, and the design of education and training programs. All of these ethical codes make sure that you are practicing within your bounds. You maintain the client's confidentiality through recordings and while in session, and that the programs that are being designed are actually following the requirements listed by the APA and by the BCBAs. The next code we will be looking at is the HIPAA code. HIPAA requires the same codes in that the companies that are providing telehealth should be making sure that their programs are secure and that they are providing treatment that is actually required for the clients. The last code we'll be looking at is the code issued by the BACB. They include boundaries of competence, third-party involvement services, rights and prerogatives of clients, maintaining confidentiality, maintaining records, and using behavior analytic assessment consent. This also covers making sure that everyone is practicing within their bounds of competency, and that if you're using a third party to provide telehealth services, you are making sure that everyone is in agreement and that there is a contract in place to make sure to handle any potential conflicts. We also have to protect the rights of clients and maintain their confidentiality throughout recordings and during live telehealth sessions. We must make sure that if we are providing any sort of assessments over telehealth, that we receive consent and make sure that we are maintaining confidentiality throughout this.
Okay, with regard to the ethical guidelines, there are a number of suggestions one can follow. These include using a virtual private network, using HIPAA compliant video conferencing systems such as VC. If using iCloud or other data storage, always use encryption and have a password. Always obtain consent for everything, particularly video recordings. And when training those not in the field of behavior analysis, consider the goals of the program and the skills the individual already has. You don't want to be teaching something that's not in their repertoire or that they can't grasp. Additionally, the BCBA should develop a way to measure competency to monitor the skill acquisition of the individual they're training via telehealth.
That concludes our debate. I will now be handing it over to Emma, who is our illustrator and fielder, who will run the question and answer portion of our debate.
So the questions that we were given and that we also discovered throughout our research were the first one being, what are BCBA's ethical responsibilities in regards to this topic, and how do these impact practices? BCBAs are bound by the ethical codes, both listed out by the BACB, the ethics codes that their own individual companies or insurance providers might list, as well as the ones by the APA and HIPAA. Because of telehealth services and the nature of their structure, it can be difficult to make sure that you are being ethical in your billing, in your confidentiality, and in your programming. It can be hard over telehealth services to make sure that programs are being implemented as written and maintaining fidelity. It can also be difficult to make sure that client privacy is being maintained if telehealth services are being provided in the community. The second question is, what are the most common ethical violations we must consider when using telehealth? One of the biggest ethical violations we must consider is maintaining client privacy. When we're doing telehealth in the community or even in the home, we have to make sure that the transmission is being protected, that the client's information is being protected, and that the services that we are providing are falling within all of the ethical guidelines. The following question is, are there additional factors we need to consider when using SGDs as communicative devices? We always want to take into consideration the client's ability to use the SGD, as well as all of the other factors that we discussed in this. Use it functionally rather than being distracted by it.
I'm sorry, Emma, can you repeat that? I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, which one?
Are there additional factors we need to consider when using SGDs as communication devices?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The next question is, are there additional factors we need to consider when using SGDs as communication devices? We definitely need to take into consideration the client's functioning level and make sure that they are capable of using the device for more than just looking at it. We also need to make sure that the device will be used effectively across all settings. If they aren't going to be able to generalize the usage of the device either at home, in school, or in the community, it might not be effective to implement using it. We want to make sure that if this is something that we are introducing to them, that we can use it consistently and that they are capable of using it. The next question is, how have the recent world events associated with the COVID-19 pandemic impacted this topic? Lately, because there have been so many new impacts because of COVID-19, telehealth has been on the rise, especially in the ABA field. We realize that we still need to provide services to a lot of these clients, and it might not be safe to provide them in a clinic or in a school setting. So the use of telehealth has been extremely helpful in being able to still provide those essential services to clients that need them, but while also maintaining social distancing practices and making sure that the community as a whole is being kept safe and healthy. Earlier in the debate, you mentioned that there are no measures of social validity, but Kelly mentioned acceptability from caregivers in the Wacker et al. Article, which had high social validity amongst caregivers. Can you elaborate on this?
Yes, so with regard to the Wacker et al. 2013 article, there are social validity measures within single subject research design articles, but there are no meta-analyses of social validity when it comes to telehealth acceptability training on caregivers.
Are there other instances where you can find telehealth helpful aside from reaching rural areas limited with BCBA's enduring health-related issues? I now, in working in the field of ABA with the pandemic and everything that's been able to happen, it has been extremely helpful with the development and usage of telehealth services to be able to provide support to families and to continue essential treatments, as well as using it outside the field of ABA and being able to, visit your doctor over an appointment over a video rather than having to go in if you are at an increased risk of health complications and things like that. You're able to help train the caregivers on how to best handle situations. You're going to be able to review reports, provide assessments to get further services provided. There's a lot of other things that telehealth is going to be able to open the door for us to use. The next question is, do you have any personal experiences related to this topic that you would like to share? Each one of us is going to individually share our personal experiences with this, starting with Mindy.
I've experienced both wonderful ways in which technology has supported my learners and detrimental ways as well. For instance, I have worked with students who have learned to speak using speech-generated devices and lessened behaviors drastically by having the ability to mand. Contrary to this, before the pandemic occurred, a student of mine had his device malfunction and has been without his device for several months. His family has reported a significant increase in behaviors. The same student is unable to utilize an iPad due to medical reasons surrounding the use of magnets, which iPads actually contain. Therefore, the programming is less familiar to the SLP. Next, Kelly is going to explain her personal experience.
I have used both telehealth and speech generating devices with the clients that I work with. In my experience using SGDs, it can be a very effective tool for teaching individuals to communicate and engage in social interactions. However, I've noticed successful use of SGDs depends heavily on stimulus control and procedural integrity when instructing individuals how to use speech generating devices. If it's not taught correctly, a mand for something can simply turn into a tact if it's not taught under the right stimulus control conditions. Additionally, Although one article mentions individuals preferred speech generating devices to manual sign language and PECS, I've worked with a number of students who use both manual sign language and an SGD to communicate, and have read other articles promoting the use of multiple modalities of communication being effective. As for telehealth, I've been doing that every day since mid-March. I've spent my time coaching my student's mother on his programs, instructional strategies, error correction techniques, and even his behavior intervention plan. Because she had never run any of his programs, studied behavior analysis, or ran his behavior intervention plan, we had a lot to cover. I found it useful to work on a few things per week, and I can happily say with some adjustments, the sessions have been running very smoothly. I've even told his mother she can work at our center. I found telehealth very useful during this pandemic, and I know others who have used it for parent training when there's been reactivity when the therapists have been around. Having parents gain instructional control from the very beginning using telehealth and having therapists guide them through each step has been hugely beneficial for some students at my school. Telehealth has seemed to increase instructional control for the parents as well as help students generalize skills to the home environment. Thank you.
I'll go next. I have had the opportunity to experience both telehealth and speech generating devices leading up to this pandemic. Leading up to this pandemic, I only really had experience with using speech generating devices. I feel as if this topic is a huge help to our current situation, being that communication via devices and technology is the only form right for now during this pandemic. Within speech generating devices, I've used PECS, augmentative systems, and I've actually used PECS cards and boards to help communicate with young learners, as well as augmentative systems such as the iPad. I have found that with my learners that they're very quickly to adapt to the iPad and augmentative system because it's like second nature to them. I have found that with children, it is actually more accessible to use an iPad rather than communication board, just so they can carry it around with them. Ever since the pandemic, telehealth has played a huge role within my everyday work. While transitioning to work online every day, telehealth has become second nature to me. Being able to provide services, trainings, and conferences has not only taught me, but has taught the parents and the clients that I've worked with tremendously. Generalization has been a huge goal for my client, and with telehealth, we have actually been able to see a major increase, and I look forward to seeing the achievement and progress. I look forward to seeing what the future has for telehealth and as well as speech generating devices.
I'll go next. Before the pandemic, I did not have any experience regarding telehealth services, but since the pandemic, I have had increasing exposure to it, both as a BT and as a supervisor. And I have seen multiple clients absolutely flourish by working solely in-home and having a dedicated, consistent, either one BT at their in-home or doing sessions with their families. It has also been great for the parents to be able to learn more about ABA, about what we do, how we provide services, and to teach them how to provide these services to their children while they aren't able to come on site to receive them. Before the pandemic, I had a lot of experience with SGDs, with using PECS, with using iPads and Proloquo, and as well as Sign. Some of the clients that I have worked with, because of their severe behavioral problems, using an SGD or PECS is too cumbersome. It takes too much time. It can be a safety concern to have them either ingest the PECS cards or throw the speech generating device. And so Sign has been the most efficient thing for them. And it really depends on each learner's profile as to what would be most effective for them. I've also been able to use these types of techniques with a variety of learners. I've used PECS with children as young as 2 up to children going into their teen years. And I've used speech generating devices with clients that originally learned signs but weren't able to maintain them and generalize them, and then transition them onto an SGD that they did amazing with. Going back to telehealth, it has definitely given us the opportunity to expand our services, and as future BCBAs, we will be able to learn from this experience and be able to generalize these telehealth skills that we have learned now during the pandemic into our careers in the future.
Let's take a look at our references, and that about sums up our debate on whether or not technology is helping or hindering special education, and applied behavior analytics services. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.